I'm John Hill. I'm the Vice President of the ACES Student Chapter. I'm here to introduce Evan Peter. I'll give you a little bit of his biography. Evan is the former chief of the Netsai Gwich'in from Arctic Village in northeastern Alaska. He has served as a co-chair of the Gwich'in Council International and on executive board of the Alaska Intertribal Council. Evan is an advocate of indigenous peoples' rights, youth, a balanced world, and active as a speaker, strategist, writer, and organizer. His experience includes work within the United Nations and Arctic Council Forum, representing indigenous and environmental interests. Evan is featured in a 2005 full-length feature film, Homeland, 4 portraits of Native action. That follows the work of 4 indigenous people who are working on issues of environmental justice in North America. With that, Evan Peter.
Shalak nai. Shoji vampire oji. Shank ogot sinithli. Natsai uchinithli nats aithli. Nans aithli. Zagi shigan jitchoithli. Chint aishashron atlan zi. It's agwin otsal zi. Chan. Mosich Aces, Jeffrey, it's Connie, that agent nai. think I'm going to sit down just for a second after singing. Good morning, everyone. My name's Yvonne, and I come from the Netsaigochin in northern Alaska, and the songs I began with came from two different tribes up that way. The first one was a Seagull Song that comes from the Minto tribe, and I sang that song first. That's a downriver tribe from mine, but it's part of the family of Athabascan peoples, the Diné peoples. And there's a great chief from there. His name was Peter John. I don't know if word of him traveled down this way among the tribes, but he lived to be 102, and he was the traditional chiefs of 43 tribes. And he was the one who had bestowed my necklace to me. And so that's why I began with that song. And he asked me to always wear it when I come out and speak and meet with people, especially within the indigenous community. The second song that I sung was it was a Raven song. And that song in particular symbolizes a lot of our understandings from my tribe of our relationships with other aspects of the natural world. And I like the way I wanted to be able to share with you. And just to clarify, in case there's any question, I wasn't singing and dancing to perform, and I'm also not wearing my beads and my chief's vest as an entertainer. I'm wearing them because of what I've been asked to present from my own elders and people when we come out and meet among other peoples. And so that's just a little bit about what I'm wearing in those two songs. And I also like whenever we come together to share the songs. And in my life, I've got a lot of opportunity to travel to a lot of different places, and I always love hearing the songs from the different cultures and people where I go to, and sometimes they share the songs with me. And so, like in my head right now, I could sing you songs from Africa and India and Central America. And sometimes I do that when I go and meet with the elementary kids and stuff like that when I'm talking with them. So I think I have shortened from 1 hour and 15 to 1 hour with you all, and probably have about 6 hours worth of things I want to share. So I'm going to try to squeeze a lot into a short time frame, but I also don't want to just have all of you sitting and listening to me for the whole hour. I'll start just a little bit about my story, because a lot of times people ask, like, how did you end up speaking at our conference, at this conference on traditional ecological knowledge and Western science, where we have elders and leaders among our communities who have PhDs and their life's work is in this realm, but then yet you're invited to come and sit also with us. And I think my story of where I come from and who I am has led me here, you know, through the invitation of the young people who are organizing this conference. And so I come from a small village called Vashaink-O. It means, in my language, a creek where there's a steep bank. And my village is about 100 to 200 miles from the nearest road. It's very remote. When I grew up there, there was about 100 of us. I was raised by my grandfather, Tsehotsea, who was one of the last healers, traditional healers among my tribe, and my uncle. And we all lived together in a little wood cabin, and with no running, no electricity, no running water, and living fully from the land. And so I grew up, in my own village, sometimes they tease me and they say, well, you're the boy who raised himself by the creek, because my grandfather was pretty old and my uncle was trapped in some of the places that some of our people get trapped sometimes, thinking that they're not capable as they are to really live a full life still. And so he wasn't really there for me a lot. And so I raised myself by the creek. I spent most of every day I can remember as a child going down to that creek, fishing for my food for that night or hunting for it. I taught myself how to take care of geese and ducks and muskrats and ground squirrels and grayling and whitefish, and how to make spears. And later when I talk with some of our elders, they say that's where our knowledge comes from is from the land and our time that we spend there. And over time, that knowledge is kind of fine-tuned. So I grew up in a village like that, really, really out there. And then my mom wanted me to get a better Western education about the time I was turning a teenager. And so she took me out of the village and put me into the city of Fairbanks. And that's where I got my Western education. I went through a lot in that transition, like I think a lot of our people do when we go from our reservation or our villages, where everyone, like 99% of the people are Gwich'in, for example, where I was from, and then they get dropped into the city and also into kind of the Western educational system and model. And it didn't work out for me. Like the other guy earlier this morning, I dropped out of high school. It wasn't because I couldn't work through the classes. And in fact, all my teachers in high school knew that. They all supported me to drop out except for one. And it was just the system and the structure of it was too, the power dynamics in it, I couldn't handle. Raising my hand, asked to use the bathroom, you know, that sort of thing. And also I felt like my own path was kind of already set for me, and I had a sense of what kind of knowledge was important for me to understand that would help carry me in my lifetime. And by the time I was really 13, which is about the time we go through a lot of the puberty ceremony and adulthood ceremonies among our peoples, traditionally, I had already considered myself a full-grown adult. I could hunt and fish and build my own cabin and have my own children, and so my mentality was totally different than what I found among my own age group in the city. So I left that system and took a look around me, though, because what happened was when I moved to the city, I moved into the low-income housing areas and where most of the other Native people from the villages live. And when I looked around at our people, I saw that a lot of suffering, a lot of struggling, whether it was domestic violence type things or alcohol or substance abuse things, or whether it was just feeling beat down by a system, whether it's a state government or federal government, that's kind of controlling our ways of life. And I remember as a teenager thinking that there's got to be another way. There's got to be a way for us to move from that place to another place that's healthier for us. And so at about the time I was 16, really, I think things really through my dreams and through prayer, you know, things became more clear to me. And so I chose to follow this path that I saw there before me that was going to be a real challenging path of trying to face the challenges that come to me and address them and learn from them and grow from them. And interestingly enough, that led me back into the Western education. And I argued my way into the University of Alaska. It took me a year. They denied me about 8 times. And then finally one of the Pacific Islander people who were there accepted me in the university on the basis that I pass a practice ACT and get my GED in the first semester. And because he said, you know, if you're as consistent with your college work as you are with coming here and arguing with us to let you in, then you might be able to make it through. I had a mohawk at the time. In fact, I had a mohawk up until about 1 month before my tribe made me a chief. So I ended up going back to school. And to sum up my story, because I don't want to talk too much on it, I want to start talking on some of the topics I got here that I want to share with you, is I went into academia and really tried to find ways within it to garner the type of knowledge that I was interested in having. And so in my time there, I developed several of my courses as independent studies with professors who understood what it was I was after. And so some of my classes were like sitting with groups of elders for a semester and just learning from them. And at the end of it, I read a paper about it. And so I was really lucky in my college career to also be able to integrate what I would consider traditional knowledge training from chiefs and elders and leaders. What also happened to me, though, when I was in college is I met a lot of other young Native people who, in Alaska, especially for us, because we were born after 1971, which was the Native Claims Settlement Act, which is a major piece of legislation on Alaskan Native people, we were excluded from the native infrastructure up there, from getting college grants, for example, from the native corporations and things like that. And so we were really talking about how unjust the system was that was laid upon us through federal Indian law and through the United States. And so we started organizing ourselves into Native youth organizations, and we formed several of them. One was called Young Alaska Natives Initiating Change, called YANIC. And it became a statewide organization. We held statewide conferences and brought in other leaders to talk with us and really dialoguing about how we can make some change happen. And that basically led me both of those paths back home as soon as I finished college, where I took up leadership, traditional leadership among my people, and was there up until just a couple years ago, married a Navajo woman, and then I promised her grandfather that when our baby was born, I'd move down there, so we've been down there among the Navajo Diné people for almost 2 years now. Through my years, even though I'm really young, I know that I served in a lot of different capacities, maybe on the board of about 14 different organizations, some as big as $60 million a year budgets, some as small as $1,000 a year, just grassroots organizations, and in traditional leadership, also some Western positions. And so really what I'm sharing with you today comes from what was passed on to me by my ancestors and the elders and the people that I've sat with through the years. And they're simply what I'm sharing with you is my experiences and what I think I've come to understand. So that's basically what I'm hoping to share some with you. So I want to just talk about a few things I think are really important. And in a roundabout way, this relates very significantly to what we're talking about here, to what you all are talking about during this conference. One is the idea of healing. I really have come to feel that healing is probably one of the most important things that needs to occur among our peoples. And when I say our peoples, I'm not only talking about indigenous people, also non-indigenous peoples, here in North America. I feel like as human beings, if there was a time where there was kind of a, natural law, I will call it, Someone asked me in an interview recently, they said, Yvonne, what is your opinion on indigenous peoples hunting whales? And this was an environmentalist group that asked me the question. And I thought about it for a second, because a lot of times when environmental groups and native groups butt heads, it's over the issue of relationships with the animals. And I said, to deny an indigenous person the right to live their way of life traditionally, whether that's harvesting salmon or moose or caribou or whale, I said it is first of all a violation of human rights of our people to our way of life. I said secondly, it would be like trying to implement a law telling the whales that they can no longer eat plankton and fish. Essentially there was a way that all of us are a part of the environment. We're not separate from it in any way. And the reality is we also had a role, like all the rest of creation, in the balance of ecosystems and ecology. And that it's just as important for, as indigenous peoples, us not to be stripped from our lands and our role among the natural world as anything else. But overall, as humanity, I feel like when I look at the histories of European nations and other places, it's almost like maybe moving on a majority of humankind are inhumane or not human almost in the way that we're living and relating to each other and relating to the earth and to the rest of our relations. And for us, it's been a big struggle as indigenous peoples too, because of the experiences of the last 500 years on our people, whether that's the boarding schools or long walks or 500 broken treaties or some of the internalized oppression that they call, when we take it on ourselves and then we're starting to treat each other the way that other people treated us, which in an unhealthy way. And so I really feel like that realm of healing is something that when I get this chance to speak with people, I think is just really important. And by healing, I don't mean that like tomorrow we're all going to wake up and be perfect human beings. I just mean planting that seed of consciousness that throughout our lifetimes, especially in our generation, that we follow that path that we know is there in front of us. It's like something that was ingrained in us through birth, part of that natural way of creation, that we acknowledge that. And then when we can, as we build our own discipline or whatever you want to call it, we follow that path. And so I think that the healing is really important. part of that is also knowing ourselves. And I think that as we become healthier as people, we have a greater sense of who we are, what we like and don't like, how we can relate well with our relations, human and other. And I also feel like then we have clearer guidance that comes to us through prayer, through what people call being guided through your heart. Also incorporating our mind and our intellect in that too. And it's all part of a process that we are constantly in, figuring out how we're going to live each day, what we're going to do with our futures. And I think that that's, at some point in time when I think about a healthy community or a healthy nation or healthy people, it's people who are living that way in a healthy manner, knowing themselves and following a path that feels good to them. And that's helpful and in balance with the relations. So I want to share two stories with you, one poem and one story real quick, and then I'm going to have you stand up and do a little partner exercise. One story I'll share is a story that actually I heard in the Northwest for the first time some years ago by a leader, and you probably might have heard it since it came from up this way, kind of up this way. It's an eagle story, and I think it symbolizes some of what I was just talking about. The story basically goes that there was a European farmer here that was walking by one day, and he saw a little baby eagle that had fallen off of the nest. And he knew enough that that eagle wasn't going to survive if it was left there. And so he felt sorry for it, so he picked it up and he carried it back to his farm. He wasn't sure what he was going to do with it, but as he was going there, he saw his chicken coop. And so it was the closest thing that he knew to the eagle that might made it survive. So he put the little baby eagle in there with the chickens, and years passed, maybe 8 years maybe, let's say. And one day, an Indian man was walking by his farm, and he looked over, and there in the chicken coop was a eagle with all the chickens. And for a second there, the eagle looked up at him, and the Indian man looked down at him, and then the eagle just looked back at the other chickens and went like this. Like that, And it took a second. The Indian man kind of, like when we see things that just aren't right in the world, in the natural world, there's something that's wrong. And so he went up and knocked on the door, kind of a little frustrated, I think. The farmer opened a door and he said, what's the eagle doing in there with your chickens? And the farmer explained to him, it's the best I knew I could do to save him. And so the Indian man said, oh, okay, well, let me try something with it. And so the farmer said, go ahead, do what you like. So he goes out to the chicken coop, he picks up the eagle, and he throws it up in the air. And the eagle wings flap like this, and then he smacks the ground, and he pops back up, and then he hops over again and starts going for seeds. And the Indian man just shook his head, put him back in there with the chickens, and went home. And then he prayed about it. He came back the next day. He went back to the farmer and said, can I try something else? And the farmer said, sure. So he went back and he got the eagle again. This time, he took him way up on top of a mesa, on a big cliff, rocky cliff. It was a long ways down. And he said a prayer. He said a prayer for the eagle. And then he took him up to the edge of that cliff. He threw him off. And the eagle, like the day before, just fell onto its back, and his wings were fluttering like this, and he was falling down faster and faster towards the rocks at the bottom. But as he was falling like this, with his wings and head to the sky, he saw a couple other eagles way up there. And they had their wings out like this. And so as the eagle was falling, he realized that what he had in front of him was the same as the ones up there. So he turned around and he spread his wings and he caught the wind. And then soon he was up there with the other ones. And when I heard that story, I just felt like, wow, that story symbolizes some of what I feel like is such important for us right now, especially for our younger people who I do a lot of work with, for them to realize that it's like, that's what I mean by the fact that human beings have somehow become so inhuman, And as Native peoples, we're put into places like that. And now is this time, important time, I think, for us to to heal ourselves and become, who we are as people again. And I want to share one more poem, and then we'll do a partner exercise. And this poem actually comes from an African-American person in Los Angeles. His name is Babu. And if you like this poem later, I can give you his email or something. It seems like every time I share this poem, someone wants to come up to me afterwards and ask about who made it. His poem is about circles, though. And his poem went like this. His poem's long. I'll just share a little part of it. He said in his poem, one day I was sitting in my round hut next to my round wife, and I stood up and I stretched my arms in a circle. Then I walked out and I opened up the round door to my hut, and I stepped out there and I smiled and I greeted the round sun. I was standing happily on the round earth next to my round fire, and I picked up my round drum and I beat it and I sang songs, and my wife joined me and she sang round songs with her round mouth. And things were okay. But then one day across the land came men with square jaws carrying a big square box cage, and they hit me square in the head and they threw me in there. They dragged me square across the land. They stuck me in a square cell in the bottom of a boat with a lot of other rounds like me, who they had also gathered up and hit on the head. They sailed us square across the ocean, and a lot of us didn't make that trip. When we got to the other place, for just a split second we were happy because we saw other rounds like us. They lived in round teepees, they had round fires, they beat round drums and sang round songs with their round mouths, but they took those rounds and put them on square reservations. They took us and put us on square plantations. Times changed and we came off the plantations, but then they put us into square rooms in square schools to teach us to repeat squarely what it was we were to know. I learned E equals MC squared. And if I didn't repeat it correctly, I got hit squarely on the hand. And his poem goes on to the idea of the world of, the achievement is the way that we perceive our world. And I think that his poem is so powerful too. When I first heard that, I said, yeah, that's what I'm talking about too. Like the way that we understand the world to work in cycles, and things come back, as compared to trying to create a world that's just all squares, because that's not really the real world, and it's something that's, later I'll talk about, that's just unsustainable also. And it helps, I think, in a way, push us towards that inhumanity. So, in just taking a break from me just talking at you, I want to do something. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that there's probably someone in this room that you don't know. So, I don't want to take up too much of my time. What time am I at now? 11:30. Okay, good. So we're going to try to make this quick. In 1 minute, I want you to find someone in this room that you don't know and partner up with them. And in 1 minute, I'm going to say who doesn't have a partner, and you can raise your hands, and I'm going to partner you up. So I know sometimes at conferences like this, you see someone, hey, I'd like to meet that person. So now's your chance to do that with an excuse. So you got 1 minute. My wife's from Shanto. You're out there?
I'm from New York City.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know. I'm talking into this thing.
Huh?
I'm talking on the microphone.
The reason why I'm saying this is because my youngest boy is in his wife. He wants.
Why don't you partner with me after I give them advice, or not advice, on what the question is? Me and you can sit and talk.
Okay.
Okay, so does everyone, please, can I grab your attention? Does anyone not have a partner? Raise your hand that you don't know. Everyone has a partner? I see some people are giggling like they know each other. Okay. And so it's okay if you know each other a little bit. So now I want you to, I'm gonna break it up so that one person is talking and the other one's listening for about 2 minutes, and then I'll say time, and then the next person talk, and the other person just listen. And I want you to share 2 things with that person. One is who you are, because that's the way that most of our people, we just identify ourselves, who we are. That could be clan, nation, however you identify yourself. And then the second thing I want you to share with the person is I know 2 minutes is hard to do that, but in 2 minutes, share with them what the vision you have for your path ahead of you in life. And however you want to talk about that, it could be degrees or children or farming or whatever it is that you kind of have the vision that you have for your life right now, just where you're at. And this isn't a trick question or anything like that. It's just to get people thinking a little bit about the path that they're on right now. So go ahead and start with the first partner talking, and you guys can decide among yourself who's that going to be. And in 2 minutes, I'll give you the time to switch. So go ahead. Let me turn this off.
I'm Victoria from the city.
Okay. Can I go ahead and grab everyone's attention again? So you could go ahead and find a place to sit. It could be with that person or somewhere else. It's fine. If someone else is carrying a conversation next to you still, can you tap them on the shoulder? Because we got about 25 minutes left, and I still have a few thoughts to share. So I'll go ahead and just start, and or maybe I should beat my drum. Can you beat that drum? That usually gets people's attention. Go ahead, yeah. All right, so if you didn't hear me, hopefully you heard that. Thanks. And so there's a few things I wanna share with you now. Just by chance, did anyone feel inspired at all by that time of talking with someone? Yeah, 2 people, 3, 4. That's good. They're looking at their partners going, thanks. The reason I wanted to do that actually is because I don't like just talking at people. And the other thing is I feel like a big part of carrying out what it is that we're talking about. And sometimes in academic arenas, that's what seems to happen. Sometimes as we get talking so much about something, somehow we're leaving out the doing part of things. And I feel like one of the things that with traditional knowledge and the way that I understand it and that it was passed on to me, the limited knowledge that I have so far, it was always through activity. It was always through doing things and engaging in the process, and then from that comes the learnings. And I was sharing with some of the other speakers this morning that I feel like some of the most powerful lessons my grandfather passed on to me had nothing to do with words. It had just to do with sitting with him as a little boy and following him into other cabins and feeling the way that he was relating to people and seeing and watching how he was relating to people. And that's a lot of what is at the foundation of a lot of the philosophies I think of most of our peoples is relations. Among the Diné people that I've been living with, and Diné are also part, in my language we say Dinji. It means the same word, and our languages and the families of people are similar. But down there they call it Ke, and that embodies the philosophy of the relations. Clan relations, relations within the community, the social structure, relationships with the 4 directions. And it basically incorporates a way of life. So this partnership exercise really for me was just getting to help assist a part of that building relations here among people who might not know each other. And then also just sharing some of our stories, because someone just told me a couple of days ago, they said, man, you know, one of the things I feel like our people need the most is someone just to listen to them. And I think that's especially true for a lot of people. And so also creating that space intentionally, which a lot of traditionally in our cultures, we had that in place through our ceremonies, through, you know, the sweats, through the hikes and the process that we had spaces intentionally created for certain things to take place that was relating to building relations, relating to passing on knowledge, relating to healing that needed to take place within the communities. And so I feel like among a lot of our communities that I've traveled to in North America and the indigenous community, sometimes the ceremonies are strong in some communities, sometimes even within communities, strong within families, but then not in others. And so I feel like we're really at this place where the healing and the place that we're at really is a part of sharing ways, even if they're ways that are coming to us now, because I heard someone earlier, the keynote, say, she was talking about how our cultures were never stagnant. They weren't something of the past that weren't ever adapting and changing. They were that. And we had people who because of the roles that they were put onto the earth with, who are the ones who, through prayer and ceremony and times, would receive the songs, would receive the ways that then were shared with the people that would help us make it through different times. And so that's something that I really believe in, that living. So on the paper it says Indigenous peoples' rights, environmental justice, and youth. And so I'm going to try to talk just a little bit about some of those topics that are there. First, I want to share with you, like, I feel like a big part of both traditional knowledge and Western scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom, for me, where I get caught up in it is I feel like there's so much out there in both of those realms, but for some reason I feel like there's a limited amount of application of that knowledge nowadays in the way that we're living and what we're encountering. And when I look at, I'm going to try to frame it from Indigenous people's perspective, but when I look at where we're at in the world, I feel like we're living in one of the most complex times, one of the most fast-moving times, a time where forces are at play that are beyond any of our control. Whether that's in, you know, whether that's the natural disasters, whether that's the climate change that's in place, that's already occurring right now, it's beyond the control of human beings. Even if we all gathered together, we couldn't stop some of the things that are coming at this point. When I think about it on a human level, I think about the way the United States consumes 30% of the world's energy and is burning fossil fuels basically to power that, and wanting to start leaning towards nuclear power. Or I think about China and India, who are rapidly becoming some of equally heavy consumers of fossil fuels. And I think about how now we're starting to battle over the Middle East, where some of that major oil reserves are left to power some of these huge Western nation states. And someone I was thinking about the other day, and I was thinking, you know, even if George Bush, for example, went to sleep tonight and had a revelation and woke up seeing the world for what it was today and what was happening, and said, oh my gosh, you know, we got to change all these policies. We need to respect Indigenous peoples here in this land. We need to address historical injustices here. We need to force all of the, you know, Exxon that generated $36 billion in profit last year to give a little bit of that back to our communities to help make a transition off of fossil fuel dependence, so we could protect some of the sacred sites, so we could alleviate some of the wars in the Middle East and other things like that. And if he was to wake up and start saying things like this, I could tell you right now, he'd probably end up not being the president for too much longer, either in an insane asylum, because he'd sound crazy to the majority of the people that are out there because it goes so much against, that philosophy works so much against Western capitalism and huge corporations and kind of what's occurring in the world today. And so I say that about George Bush because what I've come to understand is that there is no single person, man or woman, who has the power to really stop some of the trends, I think, the momentum that so much of humanity is on. And our people have known this for a long time. My own people's plight to protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. In my language, in our language, we call it Ijikwits Angundaigo Lit. And it means like the sacred place where life begins. You know, almost 200 species of animals go there every single year to bear their young and to be nurtured because of how rich the plant life is there. How much protection from the winds to keep mosquitoes off of them the animals have. They come from Africa, Central America, Asia, all to this one little place in northern Alaska, north of my village. And then they go back to where they're from. And in particular importance to my people is the porcupine caribou herd. It's like 130,000 animals that, similar to the buffalo, how they used to be down here, they still come through all of our villages and we survive from them. And our elders, a long time ago, actually not that long ago, maybe in the early 1900s to mid-1900s, told us there's going to come a time where these Western things, these modernization things, that the airplanes that are easily able to fly to our village on a daily basis now, from the cities bringing Western foods and stuff like that, there's going to come a time where those things are no longer going to be there. And our people are going to have the knowledge, the traditional knowledge, to still be able to live from the land. And we'll have to have protected the land so that we can still drink fresh cups of water out of the lakes and rivers and streams, which we still can to this day, without too many pollutants in them. And that the caribou and the salmon and the whitefish and the grayling and the ducks and the geese and the animals that have sustained us for thousands of years continue to be there for us. And so it was from that understanding that our people took on this work to protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge from exploitation with oil drilling. And so I feel like when I look at the world right now and I apply, you know, the knowledge, understanding of what's out there, and I could even apply the philosophy that they were talking about. They knew that, for example, fossil fuels are a finite resource. It is going to run out, most likely in our lifetime. And as it runs out, the price is going to get higher and higher and higher, and our people won't be able to afford it anyways. It's already occurring in Alaska among most of our tribes. For my village, for example, it's $16,000 a month to fly in diesel to keep electricity going. And that's in a village that earns maybe $7,000 or less per person a year. It's just not economically feasible for us. And so the elders knew that these times would be coming. So when I look at the world and I look at that, you know, it's, I pretty much spent for myself the last year of my life, a lot of it in prayer, because I felt like, because I realized when I was coming to realize how much lack of control we have really as individuals of what's occurring right now in a lot of different realms, I felt like it's still important for us to have guidance as to how we're supposed to move in these times. And so I spent a lot of my time in prayer, and when I traveled through some of the Americas, I spent time with some medicine men in Brazil from the Amazon, where their tribes are very traditional, and also in Guatemala and up through the Southwest. And I found during that last year too, a lot of the medicine people, our medicines people, are also in prayer. And so I really feel like, you know, what's coming is this transitional time. And already it's here. When you look at Katrina or the earthquake in Pakistan or the tsunami that hit the east coast of Asia, people are being lost. It just, the heavy impacts aren't here in the US aside from Katrina yet, because we have the most power of any other nation in the world, so we can continue to live kind of this way of life that's in many ways is fundamentally unsustainable. And so when I look at that, you know, I'm just painting that picture because when I think about traditional knowledge and I think about Western scientific knowledge, I feel like now is a pretty important time for us to apply a lot of it to address what's occurring around us. And all of this, I think, is tied together too with the healing I was talking about. So as indigenous peoples, though, the indigenous peoples' rights aspect of this, I really am sorry I didn't get to attend the full session that I think Ray Cross was doing, but I really enjoyed what I heard in the first part of it, just breaking down some of the history of the relationships that we had with European people since they came here. And the way I always talk about it is that, like, in our traditional ways, we always had our laws that weren't written. And a lot of them were based on the natural laws of relations. And my understanding is as West European peoples came, our traditional leaders and people always laid before us our medicines and always laid before us our laws and our understandings about how our relations would be. And the Europeans brought forward their paper and signed the treaties, which we understood to be their law. But through the years, we've learned that their law means nothing. Every single one of those treaties have been violated, you know, and as most of you will probably know, all of you probably know, and only 300 or so of them have even been ratified. And so basically the history of our relationship is so convoluted, you know, with those challenges. And so the approach, you know, that of where we're coming from because of these impacts, you know, is challenging. I just got the 10-minute mark, and I'm worried I'm not going to be able to make it through everything. I'll just say I'll bridge this what I'm talking about to the environmental justice struggle. Environmental justice essentially means that our peoples are disproportionately impacted by what's occurring. An example of that in Alaska, tying this to the whole indigenous people rights struggle as well, is that billions of dollars, for example, are generated in Alaska right now from oil industry, timber, salmon, and mining. Yet Alaska Native people are the most impoverished people, I think, in all the United States. I know as an indigenous leader from Alaska, I struggle with that, knowing that billions of dollars are going somewhere, state government, federal government, people who own shares in BP and Exxon, who are probably based in Britain or New York. And so things are really out of balance there. Beyond that, the wealth that's being stripped from us, the impacts of the roads, the mining and the drilling, the environmental impacts reside in our areas, in our lands. And so then we also have the pollutants there and those impacts. And we're not even benefiting. We're definitely not the main beneficiaries because we're paying $5 or $6 a gallon for gas, even though it comes out of our backyard. And so when you talk about environmental justice, that's what we're talking about mostly, is this idea that the impacts are so heavy yet the benefits aren't going to our peoples of environmental issues. And so that's an area that ties into indigenous peoples' rights. It ties into our economic and political struggles, and it needs to be dialogued about as we address things in whatever realms we're working in. Climate change is another one. For my people, in my short life, I've seen so many changes among my village in the levels of the water. The tundra is becoming drier. There's almost 5 million acres that burnt 2 years ago, and almost 1 million of that was on our traditional lands, just for my tribe, not for the whole Gwich'in Nation. Because the tundra is drying up so much, the forest fires, it's easier for them to spread. And within the context of climate change, you know, it's like our people just realize we have to adapt to it. There's no other choice at this point. At the same time, we have to elevate the issue and try the best we can, just like with protection of the Arctic Refuge, to alter what's causing climate change, which also happens to majority be the burning of fossil fuels. And so a lot of our work with climate change is trying to prevent some of these larger impacts impacting us. Again, it's an environmental justice issue because we're not the ones burning most of those fuels, and we're not benefiting from them. And so that's a major issue and a type of approach. So with my last 7 minutes or so that I have, I want to talk just a little bit about youth and sustainability. When I was in leadership, direct leadership of my tribe, is I'm kind of like on sabbatical. That's the academic term. From leading my tribe when I'm in Navajo country. When I was leading my tribe, I realized that there's only so much that can be done. We can't force things upon other people. We could really only go through the changes ourselves that we're on, and then share what we have to share, and then people can decide what they want to do and not do with that. But one thing that I learned, though, also when I was in leadership, was that I looked at the young people in my tribe, and when I went into the schools, which I did every single week, and I sat with the young people, I realized that all the young people get along with each other. And that's not true in every single tribe, I know that, but if you get young enough, they do. At some point, they start developing that, taking on actually some of the divisions that exist within our communities based on clan or family feuds or things like that, or just some of the alcohol and substance abuse type stuff, or the internalized oppression as well. And so when I looked at the young people, I realized that they're in a place where if there's that support for them, if there are leaders and people willing to sit with them and let them know that they're being loved and that there's a way for us to bring our communities to a healthier place, then they become empowered. And so being also that I was very young as a leader for my people, I wanted to be there for them. And so as a leader, I made that commitment. And it's really something that I encouraged a lot of our tribal leaders when I traveled through Indian country to also make that concerted effort to invest in young people in every way. Because I really feel that through this generation really that I'm a part of, and that's younger than me, a lot of us are having that inner calling, to return back to applying some of the traditional knowledge and ways, understandings of our people to guide us in our life. And when that is properly supported, I feel like so I've seen with my own eyes actually how much can come from that. And so youth is something that I always talk about. Now I have the decision on what to talk about in my closing. So I just want to share a little bit about what I'm doing right now. I was asked to come here to speak and just to share with you some thinking, and this is kind of what I do. A lot of times I accept those offers, especially when it's with Indigenous community, because I just feel like, again, like I said, it's important for us to be there for each other. What I'm doing in the Southwest and in Alaska through this organization my wife and I co-founded called Native Movement is we're basically finding young Indigenous people and finding ways to support them on their own path. Because I really do believe that, kind of going back to the poem of the squares and the circles, the Western society is always trying to train into squares, how to be a good square so you can get the biggest square salary in the biggest office and that sort of stuff. Where a more traditional perspective is that path of knowing who we are and living our life so that we're feeling really enriched as human beings and being connected with each other and singing and dancing, and sharing big meals and carrying on the rich parts of life, the culture. And it's really kind of like redefining what wealth is. Because like my elders always told me, never forget, we're among the wealthiest. Because they always hear me say, we only get $7,000 a year income. They're always like, we're the wealthiest because we know who we are. We can live from the land fully still. We have our language and our culture. And really what I've seen is that they're right. When I travel in Europe, in North America, and in Western industrialized places, a lot of times when I really get down to talk to people, a lot of them aren't happy. They're working jobs or doing things that's stressing them out all the time, and they're living crazy almost, self-intoxicating themselves to just deal with their life. It's pretty crazy. And so within the work that I'm doing is with the young people is basically, I'm finding that our young people, like a lot of you who are in college, have a clear idea of what you want to do, of how you could be of use to your own communities, your tribe, to yourself, to your family, to people, to have good relations with all of your relations. And I was seeing that there's not a lot of places where young people can come to have those discussions and find ways to empower themselves. I'm basically one living example of that. I live my life, I wake up every morning and I do whatever I feel called to do in that day. If it's to go to the office, I go to the office. If it's to spend time with my children, it's spend time with my children. If it's to go hike in the mountain and pray, I hike in the mountain and pray. And I live every day that way. And I get paid to do that. Whatever it is I decide to do, because I created. And this is where I feel like when I was in college, I remember them telling you got to get a degree in this or this or this, because that's where you're going to get a job as a Native person. And I always thought, I never did that, because I always believed that our mind, our knowledge, is our greatest resource as Native peoples, because as we develop our minds, then we can create the ways for us to make our livings that fit our own worldview, the own way that we want to live our lives. And that's basically what we're doing through Native Movement. We have 8 people now on staff, Indigenous people in the Southwest. We're going to be up to 15 this May. A lot of us are college educated, some are high school dropouts, some are still in high school. They just have real strong visions. They're organizing for protection of sacred sites, for building natural homes, for permaculture, for language and culture programs, youth leadership development, just a whole myriad of what we feel like is needed right now. Because it can't just be one thing. We can't just save the Arctic Refuge, but then still have serious health problems among our people. Or we can't, you know what I'm saying. We can't just address one area, because the way we understand the world is holistic. And so kind of the work is that our belief, or my belief, is that right now, among our young people, the vision is clear and strong, and if supported, they'll be able to work together to help bring us to the healthier place among our communities again. And so that's basically what we're doing through Native Movement, and really what's happening is it's growing faster than I can handle as a leader in it. We have so many young people, 90 Indigenous youth between 13 and 17 just came to our last weekly meeting in Flagstaff. Like, young people are seeing what we're doing, and the energy is pulling them together. And I really encourage the young people here who are in college to follow your own path and to find the ways to make it work for you. You might not be rich. Like I said, I get paid for what I do, but it's not a whole lot of pay, but it's enough for me to take care of my family. And so I feel like I really encourage our young people those of us who are in college, because also our people, we do need this balance of Western and traditional knowledge. I realize I can't be doing what I'm doing if I didn't have the Western degree. And I'm halfway through a master's as well, even though it's been on the back burner for about 2 or 3 years. Because that balance of that knowledge is what's empowering us right now to move in the ways. I think that for me, when I look at the balance between Western knowledge and traditional knowledge, the traditional wisdom is, I think, the key component. The wisdom that our people carried about what's going to happen if we make these decisions or these decisions. Because in Western science, one example is like this precautionary principle. Western science is kind of like they're producing so many new chemicals, for example, every year, and they kind of just put them out there. They usually do studies on lab rats, and if only 2 of 100 die, they say, okay, the chemical's okay. But they don't know what the compounded effect of all these chemicals in our environment are with each other, or even what significance those 2 rats dying are to a human population. And so part of what I would consider an application of traditional wisdom to that kind of approach is what they call a precautionary principle, where they're applying a principle that they don't release any of these new chemicals into our environment for growing crops or whatever it is, until there's been an extensive enough solid study done that we know the cumulative impacts of the chemicals and the individual impacts on different aspects of the natural world. And so I think that, if anything I want to share in that realm is that I really feel like the traditional wisdom that our peoples carry, which was always a part of our decision-making processes, whether it was politically or scientific or whatever you want to call it, was a part of how we made our decisions. Thinking of, as the Haudenosaunee say, thinking of what the impacts of our decisions today are going to be in the 7th generation. So much of our decisions nowadays are on what's going to profit us the most within this next year. And that's a scary decision-making bar to set. So I think with that, I'll just share that I got some brochures on Native movement if you are just interested. I'm not trying to create Native movement across the country. I want people to know that. I think that the solutions have to come from local people in your communities and your tribes, and you could call, Native movement is just a name, really. It's just an organization name that we created so we could channel money from foundations and people to support our work. But I do encourage people, you can look at the model we're using and the projects we're doing, and you guys can, if you're interested, apply some of those ways and approaches to the work that needs to happen in your communities. And so there's brochures about our work there. There's also bumper stickers that you're welcome to take, and if you could donate $1 for those, that would be great, but if not, you could take them anyways, because that helps us to replace them. And then I also have a few copies of the movie Homeland for sale for $30 a piece if anyone wants one, because people usually always ask me when I'm traveling if they can get a copy, and so I have a few here. And that's it. So, ehehe, masicho.